So Charlie Kirk was doing his radio show, I guess, the other day, and he said something that is astonishing, even for Charlie Kirk. He tries to link trans people to the issue of inflation and blames like the same sort of mindset that leads to people being trans leads to inflation happening in the country. I don't know. You guys watch and then I'll respond.
So one of the reasons why we take such a strong stance and opinion on the trans issue is it's an issue of reality. You do not get to determine your own reality. Do not get to all of a sudden say, I'm rich or I'm poor. No, we actually have to look at some evidence of whether or not you're rich or poor. Now, some of those are relative terms. Rich according to who? Rich according to what? I understand that. But relatively, some of the terms we use, short, tall, you can't just make them up. You say, oh, wow, that person is taller than that person. That person is faster than that person. That person is stronger than that person. And one of the reasons why we've been so insistent against this idea you could change your gender or change your sex or change both of them is that when you start to indulge in the belief that you could become whatever you want and reality is subjective, not objective, you're going to have ramifications that nobody anticipated or intended. So there's a direct connection to inflation and the trans issue. I say, Charlie, come on, they couldn't be further apart. No, they're exactly the same. They're the same in this aspect. When you believe that men can become women, why wouldn't you also believe that you could print wealth? If you believe that someone can change their gender, why wouldn't you also believe that money is wealth? Now, there are very simple laws of economics, just like there's laws of nature, there's laws of physics, laws of thermodynamics, laws of biology. We must live according to those laws.
I'm so tired, man. I'm so tired. Like, we get it, Charlie. We get it. You are defining yourself as, I'm the right-wing guy. That's who I am. I'm Mr. Right-wing. I'm Mr. Conservative Republican. I get it. I get it. I get it. The posturing. I mean, this is nothing but, like, right-wing virtue signaling. I'm the right-wingiest of the right-wingers. I'm the pure conservative Republican, and I'm going to make those pure conservative Republican arguments to the point where you stretch something to absurdity. You stretch something to absurdity. All right, so let's go through this. He starts out by saying, you know, the trans issue is, quote, an issue of reality. We've been insistent against this idea you can change your gender or change your sex. So the idea that it's an issue of reality, yeah, I'd argue everything is an issue of reality. The nuance that exists with trans people in particular is that they may be born biologically male or female, but they feel like they are the opposite. So that's why the term gender exists. It is absolutely accurate to say you can't change your biological sex. True, you're born with whatever you're born with, and that is your biological sex. But gender is the thing that is more fluid. And if you want to talk about reality, this is something that exists in reality. It exists in nature in the same way that gay people exist in nature. Some people just like the same sex. That's natural to a certain percentage of the population. That is reality. It is also reality that some people are born with one biological sex, but they feel like the opposite, and so they can identify their gender as the opposite. Like, it's not that hard to wrap your mind around the idea of a trans person. It's not that hard. You're born one way, you feel like the opposite, and so you try to present as the opposite. That is your gender, quite separate from your biological sex, which is what it is at birth. We all agree to that, or every reasonable person agrees to that. But again, I don't know, why are you so obsessed with this? I don't understand why you're so obsessed with this issue. Then he says there's a direct connection to inflation and the trans issue. If you believe that men can become women, why wouldn't you believe that you can print wealth? See, it's just too perfect because he's actually showing his own ignorance on the issue of inflation. Now, I will grant him this. I don't fault him for feeling this way initially because it's what I thought was going on initially. As soon as inflation really hit, I immediately went to my more economics-minded friends, and some of them are literally economists, and I asked them a bunch of questions because my layman's assumption was, well, Trump did a number of like COVID bailout things that largely went to corporations, but he did a number of COVID bailout things. Then Biden did a big COVID bailout thing. It's got to be because we're flooding the zone with money. We're flooding the country with money, that you're devaluing the currency. And so that's what's leading to inflation. That's what I thought. What they impressed upon me in no uncertain terms is that I was just dead wrong in what I thought led to inflation. That the real thing that's leading to the bulk of the inflation is the supply chain. And since then, I've read a number of articles that explain in a really clear way how it is the supply chain that is leading to inflation. Now, you could also say, Matt Stoller has written a number of pieces on this about how it's also monopolies that are leading to inflation. When you have more consolidation among very few companies in certain industries, they could pretty much agree to jack up the prices, and that's manifesting as inflation. Corporate greed is also bringing about inflation. We covered a story that was in Business Insider, I think, about how Walmart is jacking up prices, even of things that are really not impacted by inflation. They're using the excuse of inflation to say, oh, it's inflation, we had to raise the price of it, when really they're not. It's going to corporate profits. Stoller had a great article that I think 60% of inflation is attributable to corporate greed, which is astonishing when you think about it. So really, those are the culprits. Culprits are corporate greed, monopolization, and the supply chain, which got all screwed up because of COVID. Charlie Kirk is implying here, if not outright saying here, that, well, the real thing leading to inflation is the thing that I originally thought, which is we're just printing too much money. It's just that we're printing too much money. That's not true. And even it's such a confused point too, because I have no doubt there are definitely trans people out there who might be more on the Austrian economic side of the debate, like Austrianism versus Keynesianism. They might agree with the right-wing economic stuff. I'm sure there are trans people out there who would agree, and they'd be wrong, by the way, with Charlie Kirk that, that the printing the money is the problem, or there's too much spending and that's the problem. So it's not like the idea that if you think this, you have to think that. It's not true. And also, printing money or government spending money is not always a bad thing. It can be bad in certain circumstances. It absolutely can be bad. But, Japan, for example, it's like their debt to GDP ratio is super out of whack. They're like the worst in the world with their debt to GDP ratio. And they're doing all right. They're doing okay. So it's not, there was a lot of spending that went on during the New Deal era, and it was the correct thing at the time. So it's just it's lazy economic thinking, and it's lazy social issues thinking. And he's just slapping these two things together so he could do the thing I explained before, which is the right-wing virtue signaling posturing. I'm the most right-wing. I am the most pure of the conservative Republicans. And I'm just so tired. Honestly, I got to be honest with you guys. I'm tired of that everywhere. I'm tired of that on the left, too. The people who are like, I'm the leftiest of the left-wingers. I'm the purest of the left-wingers. And so, therefore, you can only take my word for things. It's like, even if I grant you the whole, I'm the leftiest of the left-wingers thing, and then, who cares? That doesn't equal being correct. Charlie Kirk posturing as the purest of the right-wingers here and slapping these two right-wing issues together is not, that doesn't mean you are correct. If anything, it means you're one of the more lazy commentators out there on the right. This is just low-hanging fruit for you. It's such a weird claim. There's a direct connection between inflation and the trans issue. You want to know why? Because the trans people are living in a fantasy world, and the people who brought about inflation are living in a fantasy world, bro. You get it? They're stupid. They're crazy. That's the problem, is they don't think about, facts, bro. Again, you want to talk about facts? What leads to inflation is what I just described leads to inflation. You want to talk about facts? It is a fact that the trans phenomena exists. There's some percentage of the population, albeit a small percentage of the population, that is born with a biological sex one way and they feel the opposite, and that's why we have this term gender, which allows for that nuance and identifying different ways, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, there you have it. God, man. I don't know how anybody watches this stuff and likes it. I really don't. Is there some, self-identifying conservative college kid out there who watches this and thinks oh, Charlie, that was clever. You put the trans issue with the inflation issue. Wow, your right-wing power level is through the roof, buddy. I beg of people to think about issues in as objective a way as you possibly can. Don't just lump your lot in with I'm the right wing or I'm the left wing, and and just sort of cosign all of the idiocy that's spewed. It's gross. It's just ugly. It's just pathetic to watch. And this is such a great example of that kind of thinking. The posturing is the most right-wing conservative Republican slapping together two right-wing causes and acting like you made some high-minded brilliant point. Not even close, dog. Not even close.
Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.